In the latter stages of World War II, the German Tiger tank became a symbol of not only the Wehrmacht's technological prowess, but also the irreversible decline of its military fortunes. This monstrous machine, with its formidable 88mm gun capable of engaging enemy armor at distances that made most Allied tanks vulnerable, was initially celebrated for its battlefield superiority. However, as the war continued to unfold, the elusive victory represented by the Tiger began to unravel against a backdrop of logistic failures, unsustainable production numbers, and strategic miscalculations. The tides of war turned seemingly overnight, in part dictated by the evolving dynamics of material production and the shifting focus of Allied strategies. The onset of 1944 brought with it a desperate significance for the German military command. Following the catastrophic loss at Stalingrad, where the entire Sixth Army was encircled and decimated, the German High Command recognized the need for a decisive comeback. Hitler's insistence on the Tiger tank's deployment remained unyielding, even as supply lines deteriorated and raw materials, particularly strategic metals such as tungsten and nickel essential for armor plating, dwindled. Each Tiger tank that rolled off the production line came at a staggering cost. The tank's weight, mobility, and fuel consumption issues contributed to its operational challenges. This was exacerbated by the deteriorating fuel situation, as Allied bombing campaigns had targeted German oil refineries, crippling the supply chain for these heavy beasts, which demanded extraordinary amounts of gasoline. As 1944 progressed, engagements became increasingly dire for the German forces. The Soviet Union launched Operation Bagration, leading to a crushing defeat for German troops in the east, while the Allied forces executed the Normandy landings, which opened a new front in Western Europe. With mounting losses and diminishing reinforcements, the Tiger tanks were often deployed in piecemeal fashion, a far cry from the concentrated armored formations that had initially wreaked havoc on Allied positions. Instead of operating as the spearhead of assault formations, they became isolated units, strung out along dangerous roads with supply difficulties, further impeding their effective use. Tactically, commanders were forced to engage in horrific strategic decisions, such as sending limited armored units into battles where they were outmatched, thereby exposing the crew members to grave risks, while only temporarily stalling the advancing foe. Human stories intertwined within the cold steel of the Tiger tanks teetered on the edge of despair. Crews, often composed of young men barely out of high school, faced intense psychological strain as they confronted the fear of annihilation in machines originally designed to instill dread. The crews underwent rigorous training, yet many found themselves grappling with the brutal realities of life in combat. There was a stark contrast between their initial enthusiasm and the sobering reality of warfare. The promise of glory faded against the sounds of the clanging metal and the ominous thud of incoming shells. Tiger crews were adept in their use of the tank's technology. The optics enabled them to engage enemy armor before those adversaries even knew what was coming. However, as the war drew to a close, their training was often eclipsed by the suffering wrought by destructive firepower, where moral ambiguities were stark as the lines defining victory blurred. Evidence of the war's toll soon permeated even the strongest armor. The increasing reliance on improvised repairs and the repurposing of components indicated a dismal shift in the situation, demonstrating the dire state of the German military's industrial base. Spare parts were often scavenged from damaged vehicles or pieced together from remnants of previously captured equipment. Ironically, many of these actions evidenced the ingenuity still present within the ranks, but simultaneously highlighted the tragic absurdity in attempting to sustain a tank whose very mythos had been forged in the belief of unassailable power. Soldiers who once rode these formidable machines with pride now understood that they were part of a larger unfolding tragedy. Those who had witnessed the elation of operational success in the earlier phases of the war were now entrenched in a profoundly darker narrative of inevitable defeat. As the war drew to a close in May 1945, the fate of the Tiger tanks lay intertwined with the fate of their crews. Both were ultimately abandoned in the face of overwhelming Allied advances. Many were left damaged and burnt amidst the debris of a war-torn landscape, scenes marked by the striking contrast of the tank's heavy armor against a backcloth of devastation. The post-war years witnessed a systematic dismantling of these tanks, with Allied forces expressing curiosity over the engineering prowess behind this lethal machine. A number of captured Tigers were taken for examination. Allied engineers documented their findings, unpacking the strengths and vulnerabilities alike. Additionally, the Cold War dynamics that emerged soon after led to a renewed interest in armored warfare, and the technical specifications of the Tiger contributed to the foundational knowledge of tank design for many nations. Yet, part of what remained was the legacy left behind, not solely in technical reports or photographs, but in the collective memory of those who fought within their confines. Stories of bravery, camaraderie, and sacrifice intertwined with accounts of anguish and loss, resonating through generations shaped by their experiences. For many of the combatants, the powerful imagery of the Tiger tank became emblematic of a war that was, on one hand, splendidly engineered yet tragically misguided, a harbinger of a lost cause that showcased both the pinnacle of human endeavor and the depths of human folly. Thus, the tank's Tigres, bolstered in their former glory by propaganda and mythos, became ghostly reminders of a wartime period riddled with ambition and destruction. As nations wrangled over the remnants of those machines, the narrative surrounding them continued to evolve, simmering in public consciousness, firmly entrenched in the annals of military history, while simultaneously evoking reflections on the broader human condition in times of unrelenting conflict. The Tiger tank, a definitive player in its time, became a powerful object lesson in the story of warfare, forever reminding observers of the tragedy of conflict, the complexities of engineering triumphs intertwined with the harsh realities of their consequences, both on the battlefield and beyond. As the tumult of World War II subsided, the fate of the German Tiger tanks became intertwined with the larger narrative of post-war military evolution and geopolitical realignments. Although they were heralded as the apex of armored warfare due to their formidable firepower and catonic armor, the reality was that the infamous Tiger tanks had not emerged unscathed from the crucible of combat. By the war's end, the notorious reputation they had earned on the battlefields of Europe was countered by the bitter truth of mechanical failures, logistical difficulties, and a learning curve that belied their image as invincible war machines. Throughout the conflict, the Tiger was aware of the strategic insignia it carried. It became synonymous with terror against advancing Allied forces. It was, however, not merely the battle-hardened shells that instilled fear, but rather the tactical thinking underpinning their deployment. Designed as a countermeasure to the Soviet T-34 and other armor, the Tiger was initially deployed in small, concentrated units, aimed at delivering devastating blows to enemy formations. However, as the war progressed, the logistics of maintaining these behemoths proved to be a daunting challenge. The reliance on a vast supply network, coupled with a dwindling pool of resources, raised fundamental questions about armored doctrine and sustainability in long-term combat operations. In the final years of the war, the Tiger was forced to adapt, but was consistently hampered by material shortages and a breakdown in German industrial production capabilities. The Wehrmacht was increasingly stretched, grappling with not only the challenges atop the front lines, but also the diminished logistical backbone that failed to reinforce their armored divisions adequately. Combat reports documented the decline in the number of operational Tigers, with issues ranging from the awarding of priority status at factories to the inability to foster the skilled personnel needed for their maintenance. Technical drawbacks, such as the tank's significant weight and fuel inefficiency, compounded these difficulties. The formidable engines devoured resources, limiting mobility and operational ranges at critical junctures, affecting both the overarching strategy and morale of the troops who manned them. As the war came to a cacophonous end in 1945, Allied forces took stock of the remnants of German engineering prowess, with numerous Tiger tanks surrendered or abandoned across the battlegrounds of France, Poland, and Germany itself. The confiscated vehicles presented both a challenge and an opportunity. Allied engineers meticulously examined the mechanical guts of these colossal machines, dissecting the nuances that made them both capable of destruction and prone to downfall. The study of their architecture and engineering sparked discussions regarding power-to-weight ratios, suspension systems, and armor technology that would echo through future tank designs of nations across the globe. The thick, sloped armor of the Tiger II, coupled with its formidable 82mm gun, offered invaluable data on the principles of tank defense and offense that would soon be foundational for post-war tank innovations. In the fog of post-war disillusionment, American, Soviet, and British forces each scrutinized the titan of armor, the Tiger tank. The documentary evidence amassed from this scrutiny illuminated the broad spectrum of tactical decisions faced by the German High Command. Tactical doctrine reflected not merely the machines deployed, but the men who operated them. Beyond the statistics were stories of individual and collective heroism, lives shaped by circumstance. Tank crews emerged from the sanctum of their machines, often having forged an unbreakable bond under the pressures of warfare. They shared tales of bitter skirmishes, where the roar of the 88mm cannon would drown out their fears, as well as wrenching moments of despair when faced directly with the crushing realities of war. The human element, comrades forged in steel, served as the indelible counterpoint to the technical marvels of the Tiger tanks. As time marched forward, the legacy of these armored beasts adapted and evolved within the context of a transformed global landscape. In the midst of Cold War tensions, nations no longer viewed military power solely through the lens of their past rivalries. Rather, the significance of armored warfare was reconceptualized against the backdrop of nuclear capabilities and the advent of mechanized infantry tactics. The fascination with what the Tiger represented deepened, serving as both a historical artifact and an object lesson in military strategy. Nations began to invest not only in tank development, but also in advanced training for their operators, fueled by the lessons learned from the pitfalls and triumphs that accompanied Germany's armored regiments. The victory of the Allies, paralleled with the failures of the Axis powers, facilitated a unique reflection on the implications of armored warfare amidst the burgeoning technologies of the post-war era. However, the resonance of the Tiger tank was not limited to military study. It became a symbol in broader debates about national identity and the moral complexities associated with warfare. Documentaries, films, and literature continued to perpetuate the narrative of the Tiger, oscillating between mythos and reality. It served as a potent reminder of the dichotomy between brilliant engineering ingenuity and human cost, elements that intertwined heavily upon the tapestry of World War II. The fate of the Tiger tanks after the war traversed beyond mere metal shells left to rust. They were key markers in a historical hinge, catalyzing new paradigms in military operations, the training of crews, and the fundamental understanding of armored warfare as a pivotal component in global political dynamics. It is this duality, between the reminiscence of grandeur and the reflection on brutality, that solidifies the Tiger tanks' standing in both historical narrative and the ongoing discourse on the ethics of conflict. As the armored giants vanished from the landscapes of Europe, they did not disappear entirely. Memories of their omnipotent presence lingered, reminding future generations of the enduring lessons that unfurl from the ashes of war, urging us to question the true price of technological mastery intertwined with warfare. Such recollections tug at the human experience, reflecting the tragedy and resilience intertwined within global conflicts' learning arcs. To delve deeper into the stories of the Tiger tanks and their profound impacts on contemporary warfare, don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. Your voice adds another thread to this rich tapestry of history. After the cessation of hostilities in May 1945, the disbanding of the Wehrmacht and the subsequent Allied occupation introduced an unprecedented conundrum regarding the fate of the legendary Tiger tanks. Germany, once the bastion of formidable armored warfare, was now a nation in turmoil, grappling with the consequences of its militaristic past. The Allies, tasked with dismantling the remnants of Nazi military power, viewed the Tiger not merely as a weapon of war, but rather as a harbinger of an entire philosophy of warfare that equated technological advancement with national pride and military superiority. Hundreds of these advanced tanks, recognizable by their distinctive silhouette and fearsome reputation, stood scattered across the battlefields of Europe, rusting yet resolute, remnants of a bygone era capable of provoking both awe and dread. The logistical challenges of dealing with such a vast and complex machine were immense. The Allied forces faced the immediate task of assessing the operational status of the remaining Tiger tanks, a process complicated not only by the physical condition of the vehicles, but also by the severe shortages of parts and labor following years of war consumption. In many locations, Tiger tanks were abandoned in the heat of battle or left derelict as German troops retreated. Allied engineers and military specialists were called upon to evaluate these tanks for their technological merits. What they discovered was a mixed bag of engineering excellence and logistical nightmares. While the Tiger was armored with thick steel and armed with a powerful 88mm gun, its weight and complexity created daunting challenges in maintenance and operational flexibility. American tank crews subjected captured Tigers to intense examinations. The U.S. Army, witnessing with scrutiny contrasting performance and functionality of their own M4 Sherman against the formidable German behemoth, assessed how the Tiger's superior firepower and range could influence future tank design and tactics. However, the heavy reliance on complex mechanical systems in the Tiger revealed potential weaknesses, particularly in terms of mobility and the ability to support logistics in the field. Maintenance crews routinely noted the complexities of the engine and the hydraulic systems, which often added to repair times and play a critical role in the task of immobilizing the unit in adverse conditions. Simultaneously, the fate of the Tiger tank was unequivocally tied to the post-war geopolitical narrative. As the Iron Curtain descended across Europe, the military strategists of the Soviet Union came to view the technological specifications of the Tiger as a benchmark, operating under a doctrine that prioritized heavy tanks for spearheading assaults. This rivalry in tank development manifested in a series of armaments competitions, leading to the creation of Soviet models that sought to supersede the Tiger's capabilities, while drawing heavily upon lessons learned from the Nazis' advances. The battle of technologies had unforeseen ramifications, igniting a profound arms race that marked the Cold War. In the aftermath of the war, most of the surviving Tigers were subject to destruction under the directives of the Allied Control Council, a crushing final deed to a vehicle that had taken on mythic status among tank enthusiasts and military analysts. Local civilian authorities in Germany and surrounding countries faced their own moral dilemmas. Many saw disassembled Tiger tanks repurposed for scrap metal, a bitter end to a powerful legend that had stoked both national pride and devastating loss. Those with access to machinery often scavenged parts, giving rise to an underground culture of armor restoration, reigniting a passion for preserving what had once been a cornerstone of military innovation. Not all tanks met their end in scrapyards, however. A curious paradox emerged as some of the surviving tanks found themselves repurposed into training vehicles for peacekeeping efforts or transformed into museum artifacts that served as historical testaments to warfare. Within this transition lay a human drama often overlooked. The local populations that formerly viewed these vehicles as instruments of oppression began to reassess their meanings, viewing them instead as cautionary tales of the human cost associated with unbridled militarization. Museums emerging throughout Europe featured restored Tigers, alongside educational exhibitions that chronicled the operational history of the Wehrmacht, providing a thorough understanding not just of the technical prowess of the machines, but also of the lives irrevocably altered by their deployment. These post-war narratives transcended technical discussions and entered into the realm of ethical discourse. Former soldiers, both German and Allied, spoke of their experiences, bringing forth tales of camaraderie amidst chaos, and a teeming sense of remorse weighing upon the men who operated these towering metal giants. Many of those who fought in or against the Tiger contemplated the decisions of their superiors, the strategies that placed them in such grim fates, and the ethics behind sending men to command devices that ultimately wrought devastation and heartbreak. The Tiger became a symbol of both ingenuity and folly, serving as a mirror reflecting humanity's penchant for warfare, balanced against a yearning for peace. In a broader context, the fate of the Tiger tanks soon became emblematic of the shifting attitudes toward warfare technologies in the 20th century. With each operational lesson learned and each tank decommissioned, military leaders began to recognize the increasing necessity of agility over raw power. That dynamics of war were evolving beyond conventional paradigms. This realization would contribute significantly to subsequent military doctrines, driving home the principle that technological superiority must be balanced with pragmatic considerations of logistics, strategy, and the human element, the very essence of conflict stripped of romanticism. The legacy of the Tiger tank thus transcends its engineering prowess and battlefield exploits. It lives on as a nuanced conversation starter around ethics and social responsibility in military advancements, a reminder of initiatives that could steer the course of a nation, for better or worse. As historians sift through the ashes of war, reflections cast upon the extraordinary tank illuminate the dualities of human ingenuity and moral complexity, revealing lessons that resonate in today's military practices, as nations continue to grapple with the consequences of their technological pursuits amidst the haunting legacies of the great conflicts of our past. As World War II drew to a close, the fate of the German Tiger tanks became a pivotal chapter not just in the narrative of armored warfare, but also in the unfolding of the post-war landscape in Europe. The waning years of the conflict saw the once feared Tiger, revered for its formidable firepower and thick armor, transform from a symbol of Nazi might into a relic representing the very despair that accompanied war's catastrophic toll. The Allied forces, having effectively dismantled Germany's war machine, turned their gaze towards the remnants of armored units. Captured Tiger tanks were examined meticulously, their designs scrutinized not only for engineering marvels, but also as artifacts of a lethal artillery philosophy that had, for a time, dominated battlefields across Europe. This deconstruction laid the groundwork for the evolution of subsequent tank designs and battlefield strategies, revolutionizing the dynamics of armor use in future conflicts. When the war ended in May 1945, the inventory of Tiger tanks presented both a monumental challenge and a tactical opportunity. The Allies found themselves in possession of hundreds of abandoned and disabled tanks, many of which were hastily deserted by their crews in retreat. For the British, American, and Soviet military officials, the immediate task was to determine the best course of action for these massive machines. The Allied forces deployed teams of engineers and mechanics to salvage operational parts, reverse engineering designs, or dissecting the internal mechanisms to glean knowledge that could enhance their own armored vehicles. The British, for example, saw both the potential for advancement and the historical significance of the Tigers, dubbing them objects of military archaeology. They understood that understanding the Tiger's capabilities could offer invaluable lessons in mastering future armored engagements. Decisions around the use of these tanks were also enveloped within the broader context of post-war reparations and resource allocation. Strategies emerged focused on either rendering these vehicles permanently inoperable or incorporating some captured units into their own fleets. Some German Tigers, for instance, were used for propaganda purposes or as exhibits in military museums, while others were cannibalized, their parts repurposed for conventional tank models. Yet amidst the analytical discourse among military strategists, the human toll of the Tiger's operational legacy continued to ripple through the lives of veterans, civilians, and families across post-war Europe. For the soldiers who had once manned these beasts of steel, the emotional weight of combat experiences lingered long after the guns fell silent. They navigated a complex emotional landscape of remorse mingled with pride, a sense of duty fulfilled counterbalanced by the heavy shadow of destruction they wrought. Many former tank commanders recounted the sheer adrenaline of battle, juxtaposed with graphic memories of comrades lost and the irrevocable scars of war. In the summer of 1945, with the specter of the Cold War beginning to loom large, analysis shifted from the physical tanks to the ideological dimensions they represented. Tactical doctrines began to pivot from an outright admiration of heavy armor to a broader understanding of combined arms warfare, where mobility, fire coordination, and air support became paramount on the battlefield. Early in the war, the Tiger had emerged as a game-changer, but by the time of its demise, military leaders were already envisioning a different paradigm. Combat schools in the West slowly began embracing the lessons learned from the Tiger's operational history, fostering a new generation of tank doctrine that emphasized quick repositioning, rapid deployment, and inter-service cooperation. Simultaneously, the Soviet approach articulated an entirely distinct military philosophy that concentrated on numbers over sheer power. The T-34 tank, in contrast to the heavy Tiger, exemplified the Soviet belief that battlefield effectiveness stemmed from a combination of production capacity and battlefield versatility. The consequences of these diverging philosophies would manifest years later as the two superpowers amassed their armored divisions under vastly different doctrines, forecasting a future where armored warfare would become a foundational component of international military strategy. While the technical assessments of the Tiger tanks triggered debates within military circles, the socio-cultural implications of these tanks rippled through the very fabric of European society. The ashes of war gave rise to a discourse on the morality of warfare and the responsibility of nations toward their veterans. As the realities of returning soldiers settled in, discussions emerged around their reintegration into civilian life, the psychological scars they endured, and the historical narratives that framed their service. The Tiger tank, once a harbinger of destruction, now stood as a testament to their sacrifices, stirring complex dialogues about heroism and accountability. Additionally, among the civilian populations in the territories once occupied by the Nazi regime, the stories tied to the legacy of the Tiger tanks revealed a shared struggle to come to terms with the past. As countries like Germany sought to reconcile the horrors of the Nazi era, debates around militarism stirred heated conversations about national identity. The wreckage of tanks littered battle-scarred landscapes, inviting locals to confront an uncomfortable history, a juxtaposition of technological prowess with the human cost of its deployment. In this light, the transition of the Tiger tanks from weapons of war to subjects of historical inquiry encapsulates the essence of post-war reflection. Each preserved detail of the Tiger's engineering holds within it the stories of lives transformed, shattered, and sometimes irrevocably marked by the fury of its firepower. The tanks became a mirror reflecting the grief of a populace grappling with loss while simultaneously searching for pathways toward military legitimacy, national integrity, and an enduring peace. Ultimately, the enduring legacy of the Tiger tanks extends beyond the confines of analysis and survives as a stark reminder of the moral complexities that underpin warfare, military ingenuity, human sacrifice, and the delicate balance between technological advancement and ethical responsibility. Scholars and veterans alike continue to wrestle with the dualities embodied within these armored giants, provoking thought on how they might shape future military engagements and inform our understanding of peace and conflict in an ever-evolving world. In the end, the Tiger remains not just a symbol of destruction, but a catalyst for dialogue, shaping narratives of war and peace well into the 21st century, as nations endeavor to learn from the lessons etched into their metal frame. As World War II drew to a close, the fate of the infamous Tiger tanks became emblematic of the broader narrative of military defeat and a looming post-war reckoning. Manufactured in limited numbers, the Tiger I and later the Tiger II, or Königstiger, embodied both the zenith of German armored warfare capability and the catastrophic overreach that typified the Nazi strategy. With an imposing presence on the battlefield, these machines were engineered to combine speed, firepower, and armor in a way that was unmatched at the time. The Tiger tanks, however, were not merely mechanical entities. They were active participants in the tragic human drama of the war, impacting soldiers and civilians alike in profound and tragic ways. While they dominated early encounters with the Allies, the tactical flexibility of these machines became a double-edged sword as the war progressed. The Germans deployed the Tigers largely to counter the advancing enemy forces on the eastern and western fronts, employing a series of ambush tactics and concentrated firepower at critical junctures. The tanks, which could withstand a direct hit from almost any Allied weapon and delivered devastating firepower with their 88mm guns, were responsible for destroying countless enemy vehicles and infantry formations. However, as the conflict dragged into 1944, the Allies developed counter-strategies that began to offset the strengths of the Tiger tanks. The introduction of the Soviet T-34 and the financial and logistical superiority of Allied forces converged to form a crippling challenge for the Wehrmacht. The Allied bombing campaigns decimated German industrial capabilities, restricting the production of tanks and the necessary fuel to operate them. The daunting logistical challenges of maintaining these beasts on the front lines became increasingly unsustainable. The tank crews faced dire conditions, fuel shortages compounded with the harshness of winter on the Eastern Front, and relentless air raids added to the mounting attrition. Dialogues among commanders became fraught with frustration. While some advocated for retaining armor at critical points, others suggested strategic retreats to preserve an increasingly vulnerable fleet of armored vehicles. The mismanagement of supplies, alongside an ever-increasing loss of manpower due to heavy casualties, forced the Wehrmacht to adapt its tactics in real time, diluting their operational capacity. The psychological component of these tanks' deployments also revealed the harrowing human element of warfare. Among the crews that operated the Tigers, there was a sense of pride intertwined with dread. Crews became legends among soldiers, their tales immortalized by the very intimidation the tanks exuded on the battlefield. Yet, amidst the pride, many tank operators grappled with the grim reality of battle. Daily encounters with death, whether it be their comrades, enemy soldiers, or civilians caught in the crossfire, took an irrevocable toll on their psyche. The physical machines became extensions of their identities, and ultimately, memories of loss. As the war continued, many were forced to reckon with the moral implications of their service. The legacy of the Tiger tank was not solely one of engineering excellence surrounded by valor. It was also littered with the remnants of humanity going to war against itself. As European cities lay in ruin and the Nazi regime crumbled, the fate of the Tiger tanks signaled the end of their era. As Allied forces rolled through the remnants of Nazi territory, they often came across abandoned or destroyed Tiger tanks, pervasive reminders of the war's costs. The strange juxtaposition of these heavily armored giants, remnants of a failed ideology, created a new battlefield, one defined by the cultural and historical landscape rather than military might. In the purview of military victory, Allied commanders explored the value in salvaging these formidable machines, which quickly translated into a broader interest in the technological advancements and tactical lessons encapsulated within their design. In the aftermath of the war, the survival and disposition of the Tiger tanks carved a path toward military analysis and study. Some of the surviving units were brought to the United States and the United Kingdom for examination, where military engineers scrutinized their mechanics and weaponry. This evaluation played a crucial role in shaping post-war tank designs and armored warfare doctrine throughout NATO-led forces during the Cold War, and eventually influenced global military strategy in the decades that followed. The Tiger tanks became a subject of fascination, not merely for their combat capabilities, but also for their representation of a dark chapter in history, begging the question, what does it mean to create machines capable of mass destruction? Ironically, while the tanks were initially regarded as symbols of German engineering excellence, their legacy soon morphed into a representation of the moral complexities of warfare. Museums began to preserve Tiger tanks, creating spaces for public remembrance and education around the horrors of wartime. They now serve as artifacts that invite visitors to grapple with the reality of conflict, the price of technological advancement, and the moral questions that linger in the wake of catastrophic events. Veterans, both Allied and Axis, participated in this reconstruction of memory, sharing bitter truths and personal anecdotes about the conflict, often revealing the disillusionment felt by those who lived through it. As the years passed, discussions around the Tiger tanks transitioned from one of military veneration to critical examination. Scholars dissected the strategies that underpinned their deployment, while human rights advocates began exploring the broader implications of warfare on civilian populations. In this regard, the once fearsome Tiger tank now serves as a haunting reminder not just of capability in warfare, but also of the devastating realities that atomic violence can entail. Its alloyed skin, which withstood battles and bore witness to gunfire, is now a symbol inviting contemplation as we move into an uncertain future characterized by technological advancement and the potential for similar conflicts. In the modern context, these discussions pertaining to the legacy of the Tiger tanks resonate deeply within contemporary military and social frameworks. They encourage ongoing dialogue about the ethics of innovation in warfare, the responsibilities that come with immense capabilities, and the stories told by the remnants of a devastating past. The legacy of the Tiger confirms that the lessons of history are often layered and complex, reminding us to tread cautiously in the shadows cast by such mechanical giants and to reflect upon our notions of power, humanity, and memory. As this narrative seeks to transcript the legacies of the Tiger tanks and their impact, the specter of war continues to loom over current military practices. Thus, viewers are encouraged to reflect beyond the past and consider the evolving relationship between technology and ethical warfare in the context of contemporary international relations. If you found this inquiry into the fate of the German Tiger tanks compelling, consider subscribing for more insights, and feel free to suggest topics for further exploration that tug at the fabric of our understanding of history and the ongoing implications of warfare. As World War II drew to a close, the remnants of the once mighty German panzer divisions, particularly the formidable Tiger tanks, had already begun to suffer the repercussions of defeat on various fronts. However, the narrative of their decline is not merely a story of mechanical obsolescence, but rather a complex intertwining of military strategy, logistics, and human experience that unfolded in the chaotic aftermath of the war. The Tiger tank, renowned for its exceptional armor and firepower, quickly became an emblematic representation of Germany's wartime prowess. However, as the tides of conventional combat shifted, so too did perceptions of its utility and effectiveness on the battlefield. This discussion delves into the operational challenges facing the Tiger tanks, as their deployment became increasingly fraught with logistical difficulties, dwindling resources, and the broader implications of the collapse of the Wehrmacht. By the time the Allies crossed into Germany in 1944, the Tiger tanks had been through a withering onslaught that exposed not only their mechanical vulnerabilities, but also the broader strategic miscalculations made by German high command. The once feared behemoths struggled to maintain operational readiness due to a combination of resource scarcity, which was aggravated by relentless Allied bombing campaigns targeting factories and supply lines, and the internal friction within the Wehrmacht itself regarding the prioritization of resources. Commanders were often faced with stark choices over which units received vital ammunition and fuel. It was not unusual for the iconic tanks to sit immobilized in fields or urban settings, their formidable gun barrels pointing skyward, like solemn sentinels bearing witness to the calamitous state of the Wehrmacht. At the operational level, the challenges of sustaining the Tiger programs highlighted a growing reliance on makeshift solutions and uncoordinated tactical deployments that were at odds with the well-oiled machine of its early years. Commanders, scrambling to adjust to the rapidly evolving landscape of combat, found themselves resorting to desperate measures. Some Soviet forces, having analyzed the capabilities of the Tiger tank, adopted tactics counteracting its strengths by employing overwhelming numbers and speed, executing encirclements and ambushes that negated the advantages conferred by its heavy armor. The plight of the Tiger tank became emblematic of a larger decline in German military strategy, where decisions became increasingly reactionary, often leading to catastrophic losses. As the Allies advanced into the heart of Germany, the fate of the Tigers in direct engagements increasingly depicted a grim tableau of confrontation. Stories of crews overwhelmed by sheer attrition underscored a deeper malaise surrounding the tank's once vaunted reputation. Troopers who formerly relished the thrill of command found themselves grappling with psychological distress amid mounting casualties and diminishing prospects of victory. The understanding that they were operating machines which, while technologically advanced, could not alter the inexorable momentum of the war weighed heavily on these soldiers, leading to a fraying morale that transcended mere mechanical failures. The existential dread experienced by the tank crews has been chronicled in numerous interviews and soldier narratives, allowing a glimpse into the personal toll of warfare, which often eluded the grand strategies of military planners. With the onset of the war's final phase, the implications of the Tigers' deployment reached beyond individual battles. In urban settings such as Berlin, Tigers found themselves engaged in street fighting, where their size and bulk became both an asset and a liability. Armored battles in such confined environments were unpredictable and chaotic, further exacerbated by a continuous bombardment from artillery and airstrikes. The complexity of urban warfare rendered the Tigers' impressive capabilities less effective, as fierce resistance melded into a labyrinth of ruins that undermined coordinated tank maneuvers. The crews, once celebrated for their proficiency, now contended with the unnerving realization that their most formidable asset could easily become their most dangerous handicap in the rapidly shifting alleys and barricades of besieged cities. As the Allies ultimately breached the heart of Nazi Germany, the fate of the surviving Tiger tanks diverged significantly. Some surrendered, their crews acknowledging the futility of resistance in a demoralized capacity, while others became instruments of propaganda, highlighting the meticulous engineering prowess of the German arms industry. Built for war, these tanks were now impotent in a region fraught with its own contradictions, serving as a contrasting allegory between technological advancement and the devastating fallout of human conflict. In the hands of victorious Allied forces, the captured machines were often testaments to their engineering prowess, turned into exhibits in military museums or subjected to reconnaissance and dissection to glean insights into the technology that had posed such a threat during the war years. However, the historical narrative does not merely encapsulate the mechanical legacy of the Tiger tanks. It intertwines with the human stories of displacement and survival in the post-war landscape. Those lives irrevocably changed by the presence of these war machines grappled with the aftermath of destruction in their communities. Individuals once engaged in the war found themselves navigating a world of fragile peace, where the specter of their wartime roles haunted their everyday existence. Among the tank operators, many returned to civilian life bearing psychological scars and profound shifts in their identity, as their triumphs and losses on the battlefield shaped their perceptions of duty, honor, and accountability. The ultimate fate of the Tiger tanks thus transcends mere machinery. It embodies the broader trajectories of individual lives intertwined with the tumultuous nature of conflict. Their decline marked not just the end of an era of armored warfare, but also a poignant reminder of the fleeting nature of power, valor, and the complexities surrounding human resilience in the face of overwhelming odds. The discussions surrounding their legacy encapsulate the overarching themes of warfare: ethical considerations in military innovations, the enduring impact of technological warfare on society, and the emotions that ripple through generations as societies grapple with the implications of their historical narratives. Such reflections compel a continuous questioning of how the lessons gleaned from the past continue to reverberate within contemporary discourses on conflict and peace, prompting observers to wrestle with a dual acknowledgement. The unyielding advance of technology must be met with a corresponding commitment to ethical considerations, where power brings with it significant responsibility. In the midst of these contemplations, the legacy of the Tiger tank stands as an indelible mark of the Second World War, prompting future generations to engage with the machines of war, not merely as artifacts of a bygone era, but as symbols that evoke the negotiations between humanity technology, and the stark realities born out of conflict. The echoes of their roaring engines, long silenced, still resonate profoundly within the annals of military history, challenging the narratives that glamorize warfare while beckoning a more nuanced understanding of its complexities through remembrance, reflection, and redemption. As the dust settled in the aftermath of the Second World War, the German Tiger tanks, once heralded as the apex of armored warfare, faced a kaleidoscope of fates that reflected the turbulent transition from war to peace. These metal behemoths, revered for their formidable firepower and thick armor, played a significant role in many critical battles, striking fear into the hearts of Allied forces throughout their operational history. However, with the capitulation of the Third Reich in May 1945, the fortunes of these tanks began to wane significantly, reflecting the broader geopolitical shifts of post-war Europe. The landscape was now starkly different. The pragmatism of immediate needs supplanted the romanticism of warfare, and the Tiger's future became enmeshed within the socio-economic chaos and political realignment shaping the continent. In the chaotic aftermath of the war, massive quantities of German equipment, including the famous Panther and Tiger tanks, were surrendered or abandoned, often left to rust in the fields and towns they had fought to defend. Allies meticulously documented the condition of these vehicles, and many were relocated for the purposes of research and study. The Soviet Union, in particular, targeted these technological marvels for evaluation. They salvaged numerous Tigers to dissect and analyze the advanced designs, ultimately leading to the development of their own armored vehicles. The lessons learned proved invaluable in shaping Soviet tank evolution, notably influencing designs like the T-54, which would dominate the ensuing Cold War era. The remnants of the Tiger's operational concept, characterized by heavy armor and powerful armaments, prompted rivals to reconcile their theories of tank warfare with practical adaptations, signifying the impact of the Tiger throughout military strategy. However, the story of the Tiger tanks post-conflict was not merely confined to the realm of strategic analysis and technological deconstruction. A human dimension permeated this narrative. For the veterans who manned these formidable machines, the end of the war did not signify a neat closure, but rather a permanent shattering of their lives. Surrendering soldiers, many of whom had witnessed the brutality of their tanks firsthand, faced the harsh realities of denazification and societal ostracism. There emerged a collective trauma that gripped the hearts of those who were once celebrated as the best. Their identities, forged by the almighty and fearsome Tiger, now felt tainted by the atrocities committed during the conflict. As they returned to civilian life, many grappled with the psychological scars that lingered long after the battles ceased. Likewise, the communities that surrounded their post-war existence bore witness to this ambivalence. The tanks, once seen as symbols of national pride, now lay abandoned and derelict, urging them to reconcile the dichotomy of valor and horror encapsulated in the mechanical giants. The operational reach of the Tiger tanks during the war underscored the complexities of tank warfare. Originally designed to confront the Soviet T-34, these tanks were equipped with a powerful 80-80 gun capable of outgunning most enemy armor, effectively exploiting the tactical advantages of attrition warfare. The commanding officers understood well that the sheer weight of the Tiger's firepower and armor allowed for limited tactical flexibility. As the Allies adapted their strategies in response to the Tiger's strengths, they increasingly center-staged air superiority and combined arms tactics, which ultimately led to the downfall of not only the Tiger, but also the broader philosophy behind its design. This shift laid bare the essential tenet of modern warfare. Alone, a tank is merely a fortress on wheels, lacking the ability to navigate the complexities of conflict without integrated support. In the final days of the war, as the Allies advanced through Germany, the fate of the Tigers mirrored the unraveling of the Nazi war effort. With dwindling resources and plummeting morale, the production of Tiger tanks ceased abruptly in August 1944. When faced with the onslaught of overwhelming forces, many Tigers became stranded by fuel shortages or mechanical failures, leaving crews helpless against advancing infantry and aircraft. Moreover, pervasive damage from anti-tank weaponry eroded the legendary aura surrounding these vehicles, shifting public sentiment from admiration to resignation. The myths surrounding the invincibility of the Tiger soon crumbled amidst a harsh and sobering military reality. In the chaotic post-war environment, some Tigers found their way into alternative uses. A handful of tanks were repurposed for civilian tasks, serving as makeshift agriculture tools or hulking monuments in public squares. Yet such transformations were often bittersweet, embodying the complex legacy of a once-coveted weapon of war now reduced to a relic of a failed ideology. The dismantling of these machines, both physically and symbolically, articulated the process of denazification and the societal desire to move forward from the horrors of the past. Many tanks met their end in scrapyards. The iron and steel that once roared through battlefields now melted down, symbolizing a profound desire to absolve the annals of history from the weight of their destructive potential. As the mechanized landscape evolved over the decades, remnants of the Tiger continued to surface, dissected and reconfigured in various military museums, echoing the vast tapestry of stories waiting to be told. Collectors and historians began to piece together the narrative of the Tiger tanks, restoring a handful of them to operational status, prompting a renewed fascination for these machines that had once epitomized armored warfare. Still, the question lingered. What role do these remnants play in the broader narrative of history? They became more than mere historical artifacts. They evolved into poignant symbols of human endeavor, ambition, and folly. They provided a stage for discussions that transcended the limitations of warfare, conversations exploring broader reflections on morality, reconciliation, and the human condition amid devastation. The enduring legacy of the Tiger tanks thus serves a dual purpose, as both high-tech marvels of conflict and stark reminders of the devastation wrought by warfare. The fate of these armored giants resonated with the fragmented nature of human emotions and the complexities of national identity post-1945, unveiling the delicate interplay between technological advancement and ethical responsibility in the theater of war. In examining the journey from roaring engines to silent remnants, one may uncover a narrative that exposes the human experience behind the machinery of destruction, compelling future generations not only to remember, but to reflect on the lessons and legacies inherited from the past, underscored by an unyielding pursuit of peace amidst the shadows of conflict. As the dust settled over the battlefields of Europe in 1945, the remnants of the formidable German Tiger tanks became emblematic of a larger historical narrative, marked by technological progress, entwined with catastrophic consequences. The last stands of the Tiger tanks, particularly during the brutal engagements at Kursk, which marked a turning point in the Eastern Front, revealed not only the raw power of these steel behemoths, but also the sobering limitations that ultimately defined their effectiveness. In the end, their reputation as fearsome adversaries clashed starkly with the emergent reality of a war-torn landscape where victory was elusive and the human cost of warfare was immeasurable. The deployment of these tanks was strategically coordinated within a doctrine that emphasized the use of superior firepower and heavily armored forces to break enemy lines. However, the reliance on such technological advantages must be viewed through the lens of logistical challenges and tactical shortcomings. Tiger tanks, with their commanding presence, came to symbolize the apex of armored warfare tactics. With their thick sloped armor and 88mm guns capable of defeating most tanks of the time, they were designed to be the spearheads of the German response against overwhelming Allied forces. Yet, as the war dragged on, the operational effectiveness of the Tiger was increasingly undermined by several factors, including the sophisticated logistical demands of their production and maintenance. The complexity of the vehicle's design not only resulted in prolonged production times, but also spurred a critical shortage of tanks on the battlefield. Traveling great distances, these cumbersome machines became susceptible to mechanical failures, exacerbated by the crippling fuel shortages faced by the Third Reich. The Battle of Kursk, often cited as the greatest tank battle in history, revealed the stark dichotomy between technological superiority and effective military strategy. The German High Command tasked the Sixth Army to exploit their armored might against Soviet forces entrenched in layered defenses. Yet, despite the initial success of the Tiger tanks, the preemptive mobilization of Soviet forces, empowered by intelligence gleaned from captured German documents, revealed the limitations of relying solely on technology without adapting to the battlefield's evolving dynamics. The devastating counters by Soviet units during Operation Citadel not only spelled the end of the Tiger's operational control, but also exposed the heavy human toll that accompanied such battles. Reports of hastily abandoned tanks, crews incapacitated by the incessant bombardment, and the dark shadows of despair cast over both German and Soviet soldiers serve as poignant reminders of the personal narratives entangled in these grand strategies. Post-war, the fate of the German Tiger tanks mirrored the tumultuous landscape of European geopolitics. As the Allies sought to dismantle the remnants of Nazi military strength, the process of denazification went hand in hand with the demilitarization of Germany. The remaining Tiger tanks, once symbols of terror, were stripped of their strategic value and systematically reduced to scrap metal or exhibited in museums that reflected the very conflicts they once waged. The logistical nightmare of managing these remnants included decisions pertaining to their transport, dismantling, and, in some instances, preservation. While most Tiger tanks followed the path of destruction or neglect, a select few entered restoration projects, capturing the fascination of military enthusiasts and historians alike. The complex interplay of decisions made during the post-war era, including how to memorialize the technological advancements obtained during conflict, laid bare the trauma of collective memory inherent in such endeavors. Each restored Tiger tank now serves as a canvas for public discourse, posing questions about the ethics of mechanized warfare. The dichotomy of fascination and horror, evoked by the sight of these military leviathans, prompts reflections on human agency and accountability amid the circumstances of war. For civilians visiting museums, these artifacts may become objects of admiration without the accompanying weight of remorse, serving to further complexify the legacy these machines bear. The evolution of the Tiger's legacy deepens when framed against the backdrop of the Cold War. The technological advancements initiated by World War II, largely stemming from the intensive development and deployment of tanks, such as the Tiger, fed into the arms race that defined post-war military engagements. European nations watched warily as the Soviet Union and the United States compiled arsenals that echoed the mechanized warfare of the previous decade. The innovations in armor technology and tank design cultivated during the conflict rippled through military doctrine, influencing subsequent generations of armored warfare and setting the stage for future engagements. The symbolic nature of the Tiger tanks has since morphed into a dual narrative, one that valorizes the engineering ingenuity while confronting the staggering human cost of warfare. Visiting a museum housing one of the remaining Tiger tanks today offers not just a glimpse of technological prowess, but also serves as a solemn reminder of the brutal realities encapsulated in military history. The juxtaposition of high-tech machinery against the haunting stories of lives irrevocably altered by war becomes a battlefield of its own, one defined by reflections on sacrifice, resilience, and the deep scars left on societies striving for progress after destruction. The very act of memorialization carries with it an implicit moral obligation to confront the narratives of pain perpetuated through such war machines. Therein lies the challenge for future generations, to reckon with their historical legacy, while forging paths toward ultimate reconciliation. These remnants embody the intricate tapestry of human emotion intertwined with the cold steel of war. They elicit conflicting feelings of pride and shame, evoking not only remembrance of the mechanized violence that defined a generation, but also a collective yearning to transcend the cycles of vengeance and destruction. In enhancing our understanding of the Tiger tanks and their fate post-World War II, we come to realize that their legacy is not merely technical. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit amid hardship and the contemplative journey towards peace. As such, the Tiger, stripped of its operational prowess yet still resounding in historical narrative, poses a compelling question for contemporary society. How do we reconcile the ingenuity of mankind with the ethical responsibilities that arise from the profound tragedies wrought by our creations? Perhaps within these mechanical remnants, locked in the silence of defeat, lies the critical inquiry that continues to propel humanity towards a more enlightened understanding of the past, a world that remembers, learns, and ultimately seeks to foster peace in the face of harrowing memories. The end of World War II marked not only a turning point in global politics, but also precipitated a seismic shift in military technology and doctrine. Thus, the fate of the German Tiger tanks transcended mere mechanization. It serves as a telling case study, illuminating how technological marvels can simultaneously embody military might and facilitate profound human consequences. The Tiger Wine, developed in the early 1940s, became synonymous with armored warfare excellence. It was renowned for its formidable 80-caliber gun capable of piercing the thickest armor. Its sheer weight, at nearly 57 tons, often rendered it a monstrous silhouette against the horizons of war-torn Europe. However, the engineering complexity of these tanks came at a significant cost. They were challenging to maintain in field conditions, forcing commanders to make agonizing decisions regarding their deployment when faced with logistical realities. After the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany in May 1945, much of the German military hardware, including the iconic Tiger tanks, found themselves at the crossroads of history. Captured by the Allies, a strategic assessment of these machines began, largely influenced by the rapidly evolving needs of post-war military doctrine. The Tigers no longer represented a tool of aggression, but rather an artifact of a defeated regime. The American and Soviet forces found themselves at a nexus of opportunity. The intricate engineering behind the Tigers offered insights into German advancements in tank warfare that could influence future designs. Indeed, both military powers would dissect, analyze, and even erect training programs constructed around the formidable reputation of these tanks. The U.S. Army's project often involved extensive field tests aimed at determining the operational strengths and weaknesses of the German tanks, which culminated in reports that would eventually inform the design of the future M60 Patton tanks. In the Soviet Union, the decomposition of the Tiger's technical aspects fed directly into the burgeoning Cold War arms race. The T-34, initially lauded for its revolutionary design, was enhanced by features gleaned from observations of the Tiger's combat performances. The technological interplay served two distinct purposes: to bolster the existing military capabilities of the Soviet Union while serving as a grim reminder of the significant losses incurred during the war, which had devastated entire communities across Eastern Europe. On a sobering level, the metal carcasses of Tiger tanks became a haunting reflection of the collective trauma experienced during the war. Commanders who once led units into furious battles faced the uncomfortable reality of these machines, now repurposed for educational displays, frequently adorned with irony, placed in locations as grave as concentration camps or in memorial parks, prompting society to confront the legacy of violence that events produced. Yet, the tangible remnants of the Tiger tanks were not merely for analysis or reuse. They reflected deeper human emotions, serving as testament to the lives lost and families forever altered by warfare. Allied soldiers who encountered these tanks in the field often described their initial awe, quickly supplanted by trepidation. The stories of men who manned these behemoths are imbued with futility, caught between duty and the grim realities of their own destruction. Many narratives spotlight the fate of the younger conscripts who were compelled to fight, often facing a harsh and unyielding fate as they struggled to navigate the calls for aggression against their will for survival. Accounts shared by surviving soldiers illustrate an internal conflict. Many recounted their fervor for serving the Reich, yet despaired at witnessing the immense loss of life. Both their own compatriots and the civilian casualties that littered the European theater as a direct result of their tanks' firepower. In the immediate aftermath of the war, what remained of the Tiger tanks varied drastically. Some fell into the hands of eager collectors and enthusiasts, cultivated from a romanticized view of wartime machinery. Others, however, met a fate more ignominious. They were systematically dismantled in scrapyards, stripped of their iconic advantages until they dangled precariously between obsolescence and historical fascination. The denouement of these armored giants further echoed conversations regarding accountability and the ethics of warfare. It invited reflection not only on the technological feats of militarism, but also on the moral implications that technology carries. The post-war debate surrounding the reuse of the Tiger tanks is emblematic of a broader struggle to reconcile the legacy of mechanical innovation with the destruction it facilitated, a duality that continues to permeate the discourse of military engagements in contemporary contexts. As historians sift through these narratives, they uncover the interplay of military logistics within the sphere of evolving technology and human experience. The complex systems of parts manufacturing that once fueled the production of these tanks languished in disrepair, reflecting the shifting realities of economies shattered by war. Decentralized efforts of the Allied forces to utilize or demolish remnants of the German military served a multifaceted purpose. It helped facilitate a rapid reintegration of raw materials while simultaneously aiming to eliminate any vestiges of Nazi dominance in post-war Europe. The political maneuvering of such actions inadvertently echoed through communities that already bore heavy scars from the war. Residents grappled not just with physical destruction, but with the psychological toll that was wrought upon them, since the gnashing of metal and the cries of anguish from those caught in the crossfire left indelible marks on urban landscapes and communal memories. Nevertheless, the fate of the Tiger tanks serves as a microcosm of military history. Their legacy resonates as both a tale of unparalleled engineering and a cautionary account of the costs associated with war. The post-war destiny of these armored leviathans mirrored the people who once operated within their confines. They became part of a broader narrative acknowledging the profound human struggle against seemingly insurmountable odds, while simultaneously confronting the delicate complexity surrounding technological legacies in the shadow of devastation. In the end, the fate of the Tiger tanks reflects humanity's ongoing engagement with its own tragic history, urging us to ponder the valuable lessons learned from a world marred by conflict and spurring a collective commitment to fostering a future defined not merely by military might, but by a sustained pursuit for peace and understanding in the wake of harrowing memories. The afterlife of the German Tiger tanks post-World War II is laden with a spectrum of logistical challenges, military contemplation, and the heavy human resonance that accompanies the remnants of war machinery. As the war drew to a close in May 1945, the fate of these formidable tanks was uncertain. While they were initially revered for their engineering prowess and battlefield dominance, the Allied forces swiftly sought to neutralize any potential threats posed by these beasts of war. The professional soldier's perspective during the closing days of the Third Reich reflected a heartbreaking juxtaposition of wartime camaraderie and the burgeoning realization of impending defeat. Those who had once taken pride in operating the Tiger tanks prepared for their demise. Crews that had once navigated terrain with a mix of trepidation and conviction now found themselves transitioning to survivors of a vanquished legend. In the months that followed the end of hostilities, a significant number of Tiger tanks roamed the remnants of the war-torn landscapes in Europe, embodying an irony born of mechanical excellence juxtaposed against their desolate surroundings. Through meticulous analysis of operational records and survivor accounts, it becomes apparent that these tanks, despite being formidable machines, were far from invincible. Their operational complexities, the interwoven systems of power, communication, and armaments, created an intimidating but ultimately vulnerable configuration. The logistical challenges of fuel shortages, spare parts, and maintenance exacerbated their suitability for continued warfare. As the Allies surveyed the overturned carcasses of the German war machine, they came to understand that the Tigers were not only emblematic of Nazi militarism, but also encapsulated the frailty of human ambition against the relentless progress of time. American forces particularly focused on the dismantling and study of these tanks. Within weeks of the war's conclusion, directives from the top echelons of command precipitated the establishment of salvage operations aimed at a systematic disassembly and analysis of the Tiger tanks. This involved a network of engineers and diesel experts who observed not only the mechanical integrity of the tanks, but also their potential applications in shaping future armored vehicle designs. The project entailed a rigorous series of evaluations where conflicting impressions regarding the prowess versus the shortcomings of the Tiger tanks were extensively documented. While their 80-8mm gun was heralded as a formidable weapon, capable of penetrating most Allied armor, the heavy weight, around 56 tons, severely limited their maneuverability and operational effectiveness in varied terrains. The meticulous dissection of these tanks deepened the understanding of armored warfare, providing insights that eventually influenced the designs of post-war vehicles. On another front, the Soviet Union approached the fate of the Tiger tanks through a distinctly different lens. With their own strategic aims, they viewed the remnants of the German armored divisions as both trophies and tools. Intelligence officers collected every piece of hardware left behind, including the Tiger tanks, not only to study its engineering but to replicate or integrate similar technologies into their burgeoning military capabilities. This resourceful attitude reflected a bitter irony of the Cold War era. Former adversaries now analyzed the remnants of their battles to forge a new reality within an antagonistic geopolitical landscape. Soviet teams operated with urgency, often engaging in joint salvage exercises, reflecting their military mindset that encompassed both tactical retrieval and strategic domination. The impact on the local populace, intertwined with the fate of the tanks, cannot be overstated. Civilians who endured the aftermath of both Nazi rule and Allied occupation witnessed the physical manifestations of war, such as decimated towns and scattered military hardware, becoming part of their daily lives. The ubiquitous presence of Tiger tanks, whether as tools of salvage or cataclysmic carcasses, evoked a complex array of emotions, from resentment toward a brutal regime that had imposed relentless violence to an inquisitive curiosity about the advanced technologies that defined the German military. Amid the rubble, children played around the hulks, embodying a resilience that belied the heavy scars of war etched in their environment. Furthermore, the burden of decision-making fell upon commanders as they navigated the delicate balance of demilitarizing a defeated nation, while ensuring that remnants of its military potential were neutralized. The orders issued from headquarters were clear: demolish or repurpose these legendary tanks before they could inspire a resurgence of militaristic ideologies. Yet amid the clamor of strategies and blueprints, there existed an undercurrent of respect for the engineering brilliance demonstrated by their adversaries. How does one dismantle a symbol of power without acknowledging the ingenuity that created it? Such dilemmas prompted deeper discussions among Allied military leaders regarding the ethical dimensions of post-war reparations and mutual trust in restoring stability to a fractured Europe. The operational logistics involved were arduous. Disassembling a Tiger tank was no easy feat. It required skilled labor, specialized tools, and considerable time. In many instances, the methods of disassembly mirrored initial design processes, revealing the painstaking attention to detail that German engineers had infused into their creation. However, this same attention to engineering wonders also led to significant loss of life on the front lines, where the Tiger's imposing presence altered battle dynamics. There lies an intrinsic irony, as crews manning these tanks often faced catastrophic outcomes, and yet the very structure that had once promised protection and supremacy became yet another remnant of a failed ideology. The fates of the Tiger tanks serve as a poignant reminder of the consequences of conflict, highlighting the cyclical nature of military technology and human endeavor. Over the decades, the remnants of the original Tiger tanks either rotted away or were smelted down, their material fates tied to the very notion of rebuilding nations and reconciling societies grappling with the aftermath of war's brutality. They exist today primarily in the memories of those who fought, the historians who study their legacy, and in the remaining operational models, carefully preserved in military museums, reflecting an era where the lines of war blurred the boundaries of morality and technological advancement. In conclusion, the post-war narrative of the Tiger tank is not merely about the cessation of military dominance. It embodies the complexities of loss, remembrance, and the ongoing journey towards understanding both the allure and the perils of innovation born from conflict. The legacy of these war machines is irrevocably entwined with the enduring human struggle for peace and cooperation amid the echoes of history, inviting contemplation on the paths taken and those yet to be explored.